So now that we've defined our functions and now that we've defined our subprograms, let's figure out how to actually use them. Best part, it's really, really easy. All we have to do is call it by name, the same way that we use a variable. So for example, if I wanted to output first name on the screen, I could do a simple command, console.log first name. Well, this is actually a subprogram call. We are calling the log subprogram of the console object, and we're giving it the value first name. Now let's call our own subprogram. Let's do the display user info subprogram. I'm going to say display user info. Let's have a username of Steve and a age of 15. So when this code executes, it's going to write name : Steve, age : 15 on the screen. Now here's the best part. We can do it again. And this time we're going to put in Jane, and Jane is 23. So this exact same code will then be called again, but because we're using variables, the different values will actually be displayed on the screen. So we'll get Jane and 23. Now I mentioned before that when we pass these values in, Jane and 23, they get stored inside the parameters. Now remember, parameters are local variables. They're created and destroyed whenever we go into that function or whenever we go into the subprogram. So what happens is when this line of code here, line 30, is executed, Steve is copied into the variable username. 15 is copied into the variable user age. Why do I care about this? Well, it's important to realize because if I didn't put Steve here and instead I put first name, that still performs the same act, but it's going to give me different results. First of all, what's going to happen is JavaScript is going to say, hey, what's the value of first name? It's going to jump over to memory and see that the value of first name is Trevor. It's then going to take Trevor and copy the value Trevor into username. It's important to realize that that is a copy. So for example, inside of this code, if I wrote username equals Fred, that will not change first name. First name is still all on its own. It's got its own memory location. They're not linked together in any way, shape, or form. What you need to realize is that when this occurs, when this line is executed, what happens is the value stored at first name is then copied into the memory location for username. Same with 15 into user age. They are interchangeable in this case. And the second time I do it, just the new values are copied in because it starts all over again because those variables were destroyed after the last execution of the subprogram. Username gets recreated again and it's given the value Jane. User age is recreated again and it's given the value 23. So that's how we use a procedure. Very simple. Functions, as we said before, are essentially the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function down here that basically does something very simple. It's going to calculate the area of a rectangle. Now we know the area of a rectangle is very simple. It's just the length times the width. So we don't have to do much. So let's create it like we would for a procedure. Function, calc, rec, area. Keep it very simple. The name is descriptive. I know exactly what it's doing. What parameters does it need to do its job? Well, it needs a length and it needs a width. I cannot possibly calculate the area of a rectangle if I don't know those values. Now inside of here, I'm going to actually do the work. Now, oops. Let me just scroll up a little bit so we can see. I want to temporarily store that data that's being calculated. So I'm going to create a variable for var, let's call it rec, we'll just call it area. Now below that, I'm going to calculate the value. Area is equal to length times width. Now a procedure would just end here. That's it, because it would do the task and that's it. It would walk away. But what a function does, it will return the value to the programmer. So we need one final statement in a function. Return, and then whatever value it is we're trying to return. If I returned 15, it would return the value 15. If I returned Fred, it would return the value Fred. However, if I returned a variable, it's going to return me the value stored at that variable, in which case this is what we need here. So we're actually going to take the value that was calculated and then return it. Who gets this? Not the user, the programmer. So it's then the programmer's job to store this data in order to use it later on. So for example, let's say, well, let's create a full program. We'll start off from scratch. So let's get rid of all of this extra stuff. We'll get rid of first name, we'll get rid of last name, we'll get rid of these two procedures that we created. We don't need either of these. And we're going to get rid of all the stuff below here. We'll keep our calc-rec area subprogram, our function, and we'll use it from there. So I'm going to create two global variables. var rec area 1 and var rec area 2. These are going to hold the results of me calling the subprogram twice, once for each variable. So I'm not going to change the subprogram in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to leave it exactly the way it is. Now all the work is done in how I call the code. Now if it were just a procedure, we would just write calc rec area and then give it some values. Let's say 2.3 comma 3.1, and then we would just finish off with a semicolon. And that's fine. However, this is a function. This will actually work. It won't cause any problems, but effectively you've done nothing. You've done nothing because you did all the work and then you didn't do anything with the results, so you wasted your time. So we need to store those results. So we are going to store them in rec area 1. So that's just saying assign the result of this subprogram into this variable. So we can do it again. Let's say 3.4 and 1.5. That's it. So all we have to do now is we can now display those that information on the screen if we want. We could say console.log the areas of the two rectangles were area 1 and rec area 2. And there's our entire program. So we'll calculate and then we'll output the results onto the screen in a user-friendly manner. Now one thing I do need to mention is that the parameter list, the order is important. So for example, in the previous example I was asking for the user name followed by the user age. As a programmer, if I accidentally mixed up that order, that will break the program because I might be trying to do math on that variable that you then just stored a name in. Right? So if you put Steve where the user age should be, and I'm trying to do some math, say calculate how long it's going to be until I can get my license, that's going to give me a problem because it's going to try and take 16 away from Steve, or Steve away from 16. Obviously that's not doable, so we have to be very careful about that ordering. So this is our entire functionality. So we're now able to call a function, we're able to define a function, and of course we're able to do the same thing for a procedure as well. We have one final module which will teach us how to properly document our functionality.